Diencephalon. So it's the next area lower. And so what we're looking at is this area right here. Okay. Let me get this vertical model back here again. Okay. And so the diencephalon is made of what two main structures? Hypothalamus and thalamus. Hypothalamus and thalamus. Okay. And so that's this area here. See this little bulge here? Mm-hmm. What's that, you guys? Thalamus, yeah. And you can, what I'm going to do is take this apart, like I did the other one. Okay. Now, that's why if you don't take these apart, what happens is they break like that. See how that's broken now? And so this would be this bulge right here that comes all the way over here is the thalamus. Remember that was the basal nuclei? So it's kind of medial to that basal nuclei. And so here, this whole area is the thalamus, right there. Okay. Hypothalamus would be below it. The way you find it is easy on this model is you look for this pink thing. What's that pink thing? Pituitary. Pituitary. And so the area right above the pituitary is the hypothalamus right there. Okay, that's the hypothalamus. And so you can kind of see it here too. This model doesn't have a pituitary hanging, but so the hypothalamus would be this area right here. That's the hypothalamus. Okay. What ventricle is this? Laterals, right lateral, left. This here is your third ventricle. And you can see how it kind of sits in there. Okay? Okay? So what it is you actually have my thumbs would represent the thalamuses on either side with a space between them, which would be the third ventricle. Okay. And so there's a connection. All the ventricles connect to each other. And so the lateral ventricle connects down into the third ventricle, okay, on both sides. And you can see how it's doing it right here. See how the lateral ventricle is coming in and emptying right here? And so that connection is a foramen between the ventricles. So what do we want to call it? Interventricular foramen. And so it's this slot right here. See? It's right there. You can see how this fits in there like that? Okay, so when you look at this, don't think of this as tissue. This is a space. This is fluid in here. Otherwise you get confusing. And that's why when you look at this model, that's not a hole that I got my Q-tip through, is it? It's not, because this is the space. That would be tissue going through there. And so the thalamuses connect between each other. Remember, that's where the thalamus is? And so that connection between there is this little brown dot right there. And that is what?
Mass.
Intermediate mass. Intermediate mass. Right there. And you can see it here. See how it lines up with that little brown dot right there? If I take that off, there it is. That little brown dot is, again, what's that? Intermediate mass. It doesn't sound very convincing. Intermediate mass. Okay. Again, remember what's this pink thing right here? Pituitary. Pituitary is a gland. It hangs off a little stalk. And what's that stalk called right there? On this bench? Infundibulum. 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 Okay. I'll look at it with you, okay? Now, one of the things that helps you guys when you look at this to get you orientated is, remember, this area is the diencephalon, and the pituitary is a landmark, sits anterior. And then this whole thing here, we're going to see the next bench is the brainstem. And so you can see that brainstem, okay, right here. And so you can see a little bit of a nub here. That would be where the infundibulum is at right there. And the pituitary would be hanging off there. So the pituitary would be about where the tip of my finger is. And so the pituitary is anterior, okay? The brainstem is kind of in the middle. So pituitary brainstem. Between the two is this little white dot right here. And what's that? Boy, this bench is really... Mammillary bodies. Mammillary bodies. White on this one. Do you see it there in green? Mm-hmm. See, and again, that's going to be anterior. So there's your mammillary bodies, both of them, those two green ones. So they sit anterior. See them right there? That mammillary body, okay? If you now go posterior to the brainstem, this little pink thing sitting back here in the midline, what's that? Pineal gland. That's your pineal gland, okay? And you don't see it by itself on each side, but you see it together. See that little bulge in the midline right there? That's on the posterior side of the brainstem. That's the pineal gland. Pineal gland. We okay with that? Mm-hmm. So it helps to keep that orientation. It really does. It helps you out. Intermediate mass we did. Okay, lastly, you don't see it on here, but I'll show you what you can see there. You see these two little things sticking out right here? Okay? Sitting right here will be what? Eyeballs. And so what are these two things here? Optic nerves. Optic nerves. And then you notice they come and some of the fibers cross in the midline. What's that midline cross called?
Optic chiasm.
Optic chiasm. And then they come around and form what's this?
Optic tract.
Optic tract. The optic tract. So again, optic nerve, optic chiasm, optic tract. Optic nerve, optic chiasm, optic tract. Now, the optic nerve and the optic tract are lateral, so you're not going to see them on this mid-sagittal section, are you? But you do see this white thing right here, and what's that? That's the optic chiasm that's been cut, right there. That's the optic chiasm. Did I get everything on the card?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And so the questions on this one is see if these guys can answer it. This isn't too hard. What part of what bone does the pituitary gland sit in? The sphenoid, cell turcica sphenoid. Explain why a person with pituitary tumor may have visual field defects.
Is that because it sits right below the optic chiasm?
Right, so if it starts growing, what's it going to do to that optic chiasm?
And then push it.
It's going to push it, start squeezing it, so you'll start having visual field defects. Makes sense, huh? And that's actually how a lot of people with pituitary tumors first present. Not to their doctor. Who do they go see? The eye doctor. I can't see. Okay? And if you remember from what I showed you today, which nerves in the eyeball cross?
The inside one?
The ones that
And
are,
nose.
that are along the nose. And so those are picking up vision from where? Outside. So if you did have a tumor, what would start happening with your vision? Yeah, you start losing that outside. You start coming down, you just can see in front of you. And
Like tunnel vision?
And yeah, and you'd see it'd be both sides, so you knew that it wasn't something in an individual eye. You knew it was central then. You knew, hey, this isn't just one eye. This is both of them. So it's got to be outside the eye. It's got to be back in the brain. Okay, what two spaces does the interventricular foramen connect? Lateral and third ventricle. Good. Are we okay with this station, you guys?